On September 29, 1975, Jackie Wilson walked onto the stage at the Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He was singing "Lonely Teardrops." He reached the chorus. He dropped to his knee, the way he always did, the move the crowd had seen 100 times. And then the music stopped. It never started again. Jackie Wilson had been one of the most extraordinary performers in the history of American music for nearly 2 decades. Not extraordinary in the way the word gets used casually. Extraordinary in the way that stops conversation. In the way that made other performers, watching from the wings, put down whatever they were holding and simply look. He had grown up in Detroit, in a neighborhood that produced either hardness or art, and usually some of both. He had been a boxer in his youth, golden gloves, a genuine talent, and then the music had found him the way music finds the people it belongs to, which is to say without asking permission and without leaving room for debate. By the mid-1950s he was lead singer of Billy Ward and the Dominoes. By 1957 he had gone solo. The single that launched him was Reet Petite, a song co-written by a young Detroit songwriter named Berry Gordy, who was not yet Berry Gordy of Motown, but simply a man trying to get songs placed. In America, the record reached number 62. In England, it reached number 6. Nobody knew in 1957 that the song would come back. Lonely Teardrops followed in 1958 and went to number 1 on the R&B chart. Then, That's Why. Then, I'll Be Satisfied. Then, Higher and Higher in 1967, a record so purely joyful that it remains to this day the kind of song that makes a room feel different from the moment it begins. He was called Mr. Excitement. It was not a promotional title. It was a description of a physical fact. He moved on a stage in ways that should not have been physically possible. He did splits mid-performance and came back up without breaking the note. He spun. He dropped to his knees and rose again. He grabbed the microphone stand and used it like a dance partner. He sweated through suits and did not appear to notice. He gave everything every single night, not as a strategy, but as a compulsion, as though the music required it of him, and he did not know how to refuse. A young boy named Michael Jackson watched Jackie Wilson perform as a child and never forgot what he saw. He would cite Wilson for the rest of his life as one of the architects of what he himself became on a stage. The knee drop, the spin, the complete physical surrender to the music. These things had a source, and that source was Jackie Wilson. Other artists knew it, audiences knew it, the industry knew it. But knowing something and honoring it are different things. By the 1970s, the music industry had moved on in the way the music industry always moves, toward what is new, toward what is selling, toward the next thing. Jackie Wilson was not the next thing. He was still Jackie Wilson, which was a great deal to be, but it was not enough for an industry organized around what is coming rather than what was. He was performing at smaller venues by 1975. The Latin Casino in Cherry Hill, New Jersey was a supper club, the kind of venue that in an earlier decade would have been a step below his level, and was now, in 1975, simply where he was working. He was part of a Dick Clark nostalgia review, surrounded by other artists whose peak years were behind them. He was 41 years old. He was still capable of doing things on a stage that almost no one else alive could do. The audiences who came still came to be genuinely moved. On September 29, 1975, they were moved in a way none of them would ever recover from. He was 3 minutes into Lonely Teardrops, the song that had made him in 1958, the song that lived in the same place in his voice where everything real about him lived, when he reached the chorus and dropped to his knee. The crowd responded the way they always responded, because they had seen this, because it was the move. Because Jackie Wilson dropped to his knee and came back up always, every time, without fail. He did not come back up. He had suffered a massive heart attack. As he fell, his head struck the stage. The impact caused severe brain damage on top of the cardiac event. The crowd did not understand what was happening for several seconds. Then the performers around him moved toward him, and the music stopped, and the understanding moved through the room the way understanding like that moves, from the front to the back, person to person, a wave of comprehension that changed every face it reached. A woman in the front row began to cry, then others. Then the room went entirely still in a way it had not been still all evening. Jackie Wilson was taken to Cherry Hill Medical Center. He was stabilized. He did not regain consciousness in any full sense. He spent the next 8 years and 4 months in a condition that medical professionals described with careful clinical language and that everyone who loved him described with words that were not clinical at all. He could not speak. He could not move independently. He could not respond consistently to the voices around him. He was present in a body that had stopped being able to do the things that had defined that body for 41 years. The man who had moved like no one else alive could not move at all. The music industry did not hold a vigil. There were no benefit concerts organized in the months after his collapse. No albums re-released with liner notes about his legacy. No industry-wide recognition of the fact that one of the most gifted performers of the century was lying in a care facility in New Jersey with inadequate financial support and deteriorating conditions. He had earned significant money over the course of his career. Very little of it had been preserved. This was not unusual for black artists of his era. It was the reliable outcome of contracts and industry structures designed to extract rather than to protect. Jackie Wilson was not the exception to that pattern. He was one of its most visible examples for anyone who chose to look. Most people did not look. His fans looked. The people who had stood in the rooms where he performed, who had watched him drop to his knee and rise again, who had felt the temperature of a venue change when he began to sing, they did not forget. They wrote letters. They organized small efforts to raise money. They showed up at the facilities where he was being cared for with flowers, with records, with the particular stubbornness of people who refuse to accept that someone they love has been allowed to simply disappear. They played his music in rooms where he could not respond because they believed, without evidence and without encouragement from anyone in authority, that somewhere inside the stillness he could hear it. Whether he could hear it is not something anyone can say with certainty. Jackie Wilson died on January 21st, 1984. He was 49 years old. He had been in his incapacitated state for 8 years and 4 months. The obituaries were respectful. Some were genuinely moving. None were adequate to what had been lost, or to the particular cruelty of how the loss had arrived, not in one moment, but slowly, over nearly a decade, in a room most people were not watching. 2 years after his death in 1986, Reet Petite was re-released in the United Kingdom. It went to number 1. It became the best-selling single in the UK that year. It was the first time a recording by Jackie Wilson had ever reached the top position on a major chart anywhere in the world. He was 2 years gone when it happened. People who had never seen him perform watched the footage that accompanied the re-release. Black and white film of Jackie Wilson moving on a stage in the late 1950s, young and alive, and doing things that made the room feel different from the first second, and understood immediately what they had missed. What the years between 1957 and 1984 had failed to adequately recognize while it was still present and breathing and available to be seen. Michael Jackson, who by 1986 had built the most successful entertainment career of his generation on a foundation that included what he had absorbed from watching Jackie Wilson as a child, spoke about Wilson's influence consistently and with specific feeling for the rest of his life. He did not speak about it as historical debt. He spoke about it as something ongoing, a presence that had shaped what he understood a stage to be for. Jackie Wilson understood what a stage was for. He spent 20 years showing audiences what it looked like when a human being gave music everything they had and held nothing in reserve. He did it for the last time on September 29, 1975. The music stopped mid-song, but the song, the way he always sang it, does not stop. That is what remains. That is what the people in that room carried out with them into the night, and what they never put down. Subscribe to Untold Soul Legends. Every week we go behind the music, into the moments the history books almost missed. Hit the bell so you never miss a story, and share this with someone who loves soul music. These stories deserve to be heard.